Welcome. So we just found slopes, whether they were parallel or perpendicular from points. Now we're going to apply it to equations. And so the good news is being the same or the opposite reciprocal still applies, and it's actually a little bit easier since you already know the slope that you want to reference. And so let's say that we have in our example this equation here. Y equals -3/4 x plus 5. In this particular unit, in this particular week, because we're referencing the perpendicular and parallel slopes, our y-intercept, in this case our plus 5, really is meaningless. It is distracting information. In some other cases, it will be useful. Yes, absolutely. But in this particular case, we just care about our slope because we want to know what is the slope that's parallel to -3/4. So if we want to know the parallel slope to -3/4, well, the parallel slope to -3/4 is -3/4. It's the same. So since parallel is the same, it's -3/4. And we know that because in our example equation, it's -3/4. Now, if we want it to be perpendicular, it's the opposite reciprocal. And so the opposite reciprocal then takes our slope and it flips it to be 4/3, and then it changes the sign, negative to positive. So from an equation, incredibly easy and intuitive. It's either going to be the same if it's parallel or the opposite reciprocal, so flipped and made positive or negative. From here, the harder part is going to be if you wanted to find the parallel and perpendicular slopes from a graph. So once the new page loads in, get there, you can do it. There it goes. So let's go ahead and do it from a graph. So finding slopes from a graph, and not just any slopes, but parallel and perpendicular lines from a graph. Now, let's go ahead and draw our y-axis. Well, that's not how you draw a straight line. Let's try that again. There we go. So we have our y-axis, we have our x-axis, just like that. And in this case, I'm going to put the y-intercept here at +4. And then our graph is going to go over 2 and up 3 from there. And so here is our line. Now, since I talked out loud while I was drawing it, you guys probably already know what the slope is. But looking at this with a fresh pair of eyes, imagining that you haven't seen this yet as if it was a problem like in the practice, the first thing to do if you want to know what's parallel and what's perpendicular is to find out the slope first. The good news is the slope is easy to count on a graph. You're just going over and up. So our change in y is going up 3, and our change in x is going to the right 2. Up is positive, to the right is positive. So our slope in this line, our value of m, is 3/2. Again, I don't really care about the y-intercept because it's not going to impact what's parallel or what's perpendicular. Our parallel line then is going to be just the same. So our parallel slope is 3/2. And our perpendicular slope, like we talked about already, is the opposite reciprocal. And so that's going to be, because our slope is positive, our perpendicular slope is negative, and 3/2 flipped is 2/3. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that is how we're able to find it from a graph. So far, we've only focused on finding slopes of new hypothetical lines from existing equations, points, and other examples. And so what we're finding here is the hypothetical new line that will have a parallel slope, or a hypothetical new line that will have a perpendicular slope. The application for this then, looking at the next example, is what is an equation that is either parallel or perpendicular to the existing line going through a new separate point, so a new lines equation. And so we're finding equations of parallel and perpendicular lines. So we have to start somewhere. So what is the line that we are starting from that we will then find our parallel and perpendicular lines? Well, it's going to be y equals 3x minus 5. And so, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and find the parallel line first. So we want to be parallel to y equals 3x minus 5 through 6, 10. Well, that means we are finding a new line, brand new line. And so that means we're referencing y equals mx plus b. And we are plugging in things into this until we're able to find our m and our b for our equation. The good news is, because we know it's parallel, we already know the slope. Because we know it's parallel, we already know the slope is going to be the 3. Because parallel means the slope is the same. So our slope is already 3. Now, again, the fact that they give us the y-intercept, the minus 5, is a distractor, because we don't need the y-intercept for our new line, because the b is not the same. What we do need is the point they give us. So we can take the point that we're given, the 6, 10, and plug that in x, y, to solve for our value of b, just like last week. So we're going to plug those points in. 10 for y is equal to the 3 from our slope, because it's parallel, times the 6 plus our value of b. And ladies and gentlemen, this is what we're solving. If we can get b by itself, then we'll know our equation of our parallel line. And so let's go ahead and work through it. The 3 times 6, last time I checked, is 18. And so we have our 10 is equal to 18 plus b. In order to get b by itself, we subtract by 18 on both sides. And our value of b is equal to negative 8, which means our equation, our parallel line, is y equals 3x minus 8. Now, we're able to do the same thing for perpendicular, but remembering that perpendicular means it's the opposite reciprocal. It's flipped and negative. So, I'm actually going to use the exact same equation and the exact same point, and I'm just going to change parallel to perpendicular here. So, perpendicular through 6, 10, y equals 3x minus 5. Remember that everything is going to be the same moving forward, but the only difference is that slope. In this case, our slope is perpendicular, which means our 3 is going to be the opposite reciprocal. So while we're still using y equals our mx plus b, the slope, our value of m, is going to be negative 1/3. because it's going to be flipped and the sign is going to change. So now we just need to plug in the other details that we know, because just like in the last problem, every other piece of detail about our original line is a distractor. The -5, the y-intercept, a distractor. We just really care about our new point for our new line, x comma y, and to plug that in, our 10 equals -1/3 times 6 plus b in order to get our b by itself, so we know our new y-intercept to know our new line. So let's go ahead and algebraically figure out b. We have our -1/3 times 6. Well, -1/3 times 6, that's dividing by 3, so this is going to be -2 plus b is equal to 10. Add by the 2 on both sides, and our value of b is 12. And since our value b is 12, we now know our equation. That is going to be perpendicular to y equals 3x minus 5 and going through 6, 10. That's going to be y equals -1/3, keep track of that slope because it's perpendicular, x plus 12. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I do want to remind you guys, just on the off chance here that it comes up, that the slope +1 is perpendicular to -1. Because remember, any whole number, when it's flipped, is just 1 over. But 1 divided by 1 is 1, which means x is perpendicular to -x. And that's not always obvious or intuitive, so I wanted to point that out just so that it's going to be a little bit more direct when you see it, a little bit more automatic when you see it. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me give you guys one more example here. I'm only going to do the perpendicular part, and so let's go ahead and do a line perpendicular to y equals -4/7 x plus 9 through 8/15. So, ladies and gentlemen, first things first, perpendicular with our slope. It's going to be the opposite reciprocal. So let's tackle that first. Our new m from our -4/7 is going to just be 7/4. Perfect. Now let's plug that into our equation and solve for b. Remember, it's x comma y. So we have our y, 15, equal to the 7/4 multiplied by x, which is 8, plus our value of b. And let's solve. First things first, 7/4 times 8. Well, we're taking 7, multiplying by 8, and dividing by 4. That's the same thing as 7 divided by 4 times 8. Multiplication and division can happen in any order, so I'm going to choose to do some mental math. 8 divided by 4 is 2. 2 times 7 is 14. So I have 14 plus b equal to 15. You subtract the 14 on both sides, and by golly, that gives us our value of b to equal 1, which means we have our new equation. The b is equal to 1, our slope is 7/4, so it's y equals 7/4 x plus 1. And that's our perpendicular line we're looking for. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that gives you the help you're looking for. If not, email me, reach out. I'll be glad to help. And good luck this week. I look forward to seeing you guys in our Google Meet.